Now, when it comes to renovation, when it comes to change, when it comes to making things new, one of the things that we love are these renovation shows. Shows like Love It or List It. Put that in the chat. Which one of these do you like the most? I'm going to give you a few. Which one do you like the most? So Love It or List It. Do they love the reno or do they sell the house? Or maybe for you, the show you've watched is Flip or Flop. Maybe that's one you watch. Throw that in the chat if that's what you watch. Or maybe Property Brothers. Maybe you think the Property Brothers are dreamy. You can admit that in the chat if you want. The Property Brothers and the renovations that they do. And you see these restorations, these renovations, and I mean, there's something about them that's exciting. I know that at our house, we don't actually get HGTV that hosts these shows. So one of my kids' favorite things to do is if we're ever traveling and at a hotel, they want to watch them. They love seeing the rebuild, the change, the restoration. Some of you are car people. And for you, you love shows like Rust Valley Restorers, where they take these old cars out of the field and they turn them back into what they were. There's just something about renewal, restoration, rebuilding in our lives that we love. We love to see things in our world rebuilt. And it's not just physical things. We love it when we see a marriage rebuilt. We love a story of a marriage where two people say, man, we were really struggling in our marriage, but we were able to rebuild things. That inspires us when we hear that kind of thing. When a son says, my relationship with my dad was estranged, but we were able to rebuild it. There's something about that that's heartwarming, that inspires us when we see that. When someone says, I was able to rebuild my business, there's something about that that inspires us. We love to see things in our world rebuilt. It's hardwired in us. But the opposite is also true. It also breaks our hearts to see things that are broken. When your friend comes to you and says, yeah, my wife and I, we decided that we're going to call it quits. We're going to divorce. And you think, what? I mean, after 14 years, after 10 years, after all the effort you put in, it's over? And it breaks your heart to see your friend go through that divorce. Our heart breaks when we see people's lives broken by opioid addiction or alcohol addiction. And we look at that and we go, man, this substance abuse that has grown into an addiction and your life is falling apart. And it breaks our heart to see people's lives that are broken. When we see children being taken advantage of in the world around us, it breaks our heart to see that when we see that around us, whether it's abuse or whether it's child slavery that they've been taken into. It breaks our heart to see that kind of thing. Kids being trafficked. I mean, these things break our heart when we see our world broken, when we see the people around us broken. And it breaks our heart when things inside of us are broken. How do you rebuild the brokenness that you see around you, in the world around you, in your neighbor, in your friend, in what you see in the news? When you see brokenness and it's breaking your heart, how do you go about rebuilding it? That's what this series is about. It's also more personal than that. This series is about how do you rebuild broken things inside of you. You know, in the last year that we've had, if we're honest with ourselves, for many of us, there's something broken inside of us. There are things that we're struggling with in our own lives, relationships that are strained, addictions that we have, choices that we've made that we're reaping the consequences of, and they aren't good. How do you rebuild the brokenness inside of you? Now, the blueprint for rebuilding brokenness is going to come from a book of the Bible called Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah is a character in the Old Testament, and in the account of Nehemiah, it happens 400 years before the arrival of Jesus, and it's in the Old Testament. And Nehemiah is a regular guy. He's not a prophet. He's not a king. He's not some kind of judge. He's just a regular guy. And God uses him to rebuild things in a very inspirational way. And it's amazing to see how he does it and how it can really instruct and inspire us. You see, Nehemiah was part of the Jews, the Israelite people. And Israel, these Jewish people, they had been captured by the Babylonians and taken into exile. They took them out of their community, away from the city of Jerusalem, and took them to Babylon. And 50 years later, King Xerxes says, hey, you know what? Some of you can go back. Some of you can go back to Jerusalem. You can go back to your homes. You can go back and see what they're like. Now, Nehemiah maybe had never even have had the chance to live there. Maybe his grandparents had lived there. He'd never actually seen the city of Jerusalem. And what we see is what happens to Nehemiah's heart as he hears about what happens in Jerusalem and what he does about it and how he helps rebuild. We're going to jump into chapter 1. It says this: in late autumn, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, his reign, Nehemiah, who's writing this, was at the fortress of Susa. So you have Nehemiah, he's at the fortress of Susa. The king is King Artaxerxes, and he's living in Babylon at the time. And he says, Hanani, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some other men who had just arrived from Judah. So what happens here is this is where Nehemiah is. He's at this fortress, and his brother arrives who'd been back in Judah where the city of Jerusalem is. And Nehemiah wants a report. He says, I asked them about the Jews who had returned there to Jerusalem from captivity, about how things were going in Jerusalem. He's saying, tell me, Hanani, tell me about what happened. You went there, you went to Jerusalem. What condition is the city in? What did it look like? What's happening there? Is it looking really great? Is it kind of in rough shape? What's it looking like? And Nehemiah says, they said to me, things are not going well for those who returned to the province of Judah, where Jerusalem is. He says, things aren't going well there. He says they are in great trouble and disgrace. They're in great trouble and disgrace and shame. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. He says, man, they went back, and the place is a mess. They went back, and the place is a disaster. They went back, and the place is broken. And their hearts are just broken by this. It's great trouble. It's disgrace. It's shame. Some of you will know that recently we experienced a tornado here in Barrie. And a number of us were able to be involved, including a whole bunch of fantastic volunteers, in the cleanup of the tornado immediately after it hit on Thursday, and we were there on Friday. You know, one of the things that struck me in talking to people is, while they were away at work, maybe they'd heard about the storm, and when they were heading home, they thought they would find this. They thought their neighborhood would look great. This is what it looked like when they had left. And when they came back, this is what they expected to see. But instead, they came back and saw this: brokenness, destruction. This is what Nehemiah, this is what his brother is talking about. They went back to Jerusalem. They were so excited to be released to go back. And when they got back home, this is what it looked like. It was a mess. The thing about Jerusalem, you see, you think about this area, is the walls were all broken and torn down. He says the gates were burned. What does that mean? It means that they had no protection from the outside. That as much as they tried to rebuild inside, the enemy could just keep getting in. That the wall was so broken down that the enemy could just continue to take and take and take. And people were laughing at them. Where is your God? What kind of God allows you to just be totally vulnerable like this? To be totally open to attack like this? What were they experiencing, these Israelite people? The Jewish people, was that brokenness leaves us vulnerable and ashamed. They were vulnerable to their enemies, and they were ashamed of who they were as a people. When other countries say, what kind of God would allow you to live like this? What kind of people would allow you to live like this? Totally vulnerable to outside attack. Brokenness leaves us vulnerable and ashamed. When I was there on that Friday morning and we were helping people clean up from the tornado, one of the things that struck me was I was talking to homeowners, and as I was talking to them, they wanted help to clean up their front lawn. And I was picking up shingles and insulation and roof trusses, and we were cleaning up their front lawn to make it look nice, but it was clear that their house might never be rebuilt. Why did they want their lawn cleaned up when their home probably wasn't even going to make it? It's because of a sense of dignity. They wanted dignity. They felt ashamed. I don't want my yard to be a mess like this. I don't want my front lawn to look like this. I don't want my neighbors to see my front lawn like this. There's a level of dignity and a feeling of, I'm ashamed to just leave this mess. And there was also an element of vulnerability. They had holes in their roof. It was supposed to rain the next day, and there was a panic about, we're vulnerable. This rain's just going to come right into my house. It's going to damage everything. People can come and loot my house. There's a big hole in the side. They could just get in and take things from us. Brokenness leaves us vulnerable and ashamed. And that's just not about walls, and that's just not about buildings. It's about our own lives. The brokenness inside of us makes us feel vulnerable and ashamed. I've shared with some of you before the struggles that I've had with anxiety. And when someone sees that in me, I feel a vulnerability. And on my bad days, I can feel ashamed that I'm not strong, that maybe I'm weak, that I can't get a handle on this. Mental illness can be a brokenness that makes us feel vulnerable and ashamed when we feel that way. Maybe for you, your relationship with your spouse isn't in a good place. It's broken. And you don't like to talk about it with anybody because it makes you feel vulnerable. And you know what? You're a little bit ashamed because your relationship is falling apart and the relationships of your friends looks great. The relationships that your brother has looks great. And you don't want to talk about it because you quietly feel vulnerable and ashamed. Maybe for you, it's a relationship with a parent or a relationship with a child. That you know that relationship is broken and you don't want to bring it up because you feel vulnerable in that conversation. And you also feel a little bit ashamed. If you want to find the brokenness in your life, just look for the places that you feel vulnerable and ashamed. See, we can all look at the brokenness out there and we can all look at how we can rebuild it. And I do think that that's important. We want to be world changers, but we also need to recognize the brokenness inside of us so we can be rebuilt, so that we can find hope in those areas. Where are the areas of your life that are broken? Maybe for you, you're financially broken. You've made choices financially that have put you in a position where now things are falling apart. Or maybe your business struggled in the midst of the last year. Maybe when it came to your employment, you haven't had the employment you used to have, and financially things are broken. Maybe it's your marriage, a relationship with a friend, a coworker. Maybe for you, you just feel broken by anxiety and worry and overwhelm. Where are the areas in your life that are broken? Now, you might say to me, Jeff, I don't have any areas in my life that are broken. Okay, that's fair. So my question for you is, where is the world around you broken? Where do you see brokenness in the world around you? Where you see people struggling with poverty, or you see how kids are being treated in this area, and you think that's just not right, that's broken. People who need housing, that's not right, that's broken. Moms who need protection, you look at that and go, that's not right, that's broken. Where do you see the world around you broken? Because you can't begin to rebuild until you first recognize what's broken. So then what does Nehemiah do? He hears that, man, Jerusalem is broken. What does he do? It says, when I heard this. What does he do? When I heard this, what do you think he did? It says, when I heard this, I jumped on my camel with my tools and I headed out to fix things. Okay, that's not really what it says. This is probably not the NLT, it's the Jeff version. But I'm an action-oriented person. That's what I'd want to do. Many of you are action-oriented people. You're going to say, oh, the walls are broken. I got my hammer. Let's go fix things. Let's go make it right. Let's act. Let's sit down and make a plan, and let's get out there and fix this. I mean, you would think Nehemiah, that's what he might look to do, to head out to fix things. For many of us, when someone comes to us and they're experiencing brokenness, we love to tell them all the things they should do. Well, you should do this, and you should fix it this way, or let me help you, and I'm bringing over a casserole, and I'm going to drop food off at your house, and all those things are great. But that's not what Nehemiah does. See, Nehemiah recognizes that there's something more important than action. Action will come, but you have to start in a totally different place. When you see brokenness, this is what he does. He says, when I heard this, I sat down and I wept. When I heard about the brokenness of the city that I loved, I sat down and I wept. He didn't cry, he wept. He wept over the brokenness of the city that he loved. I mean, I resonate with this. That is the heart of our church, that we weep over the brokenness in Barrie and Aurelia and across Simcoe County, that when we look locally here, we weep over the brokenness in our community, the people that feel like life is against them, and we want to be for them, and we weep over that. That coming out of the last year that we had, that there's people struggling with mental illness and with anxiety and with financial hurt, and our church's mission has never been more important than it is. And we sit down, and where do we begin? The first place we begin is we weep. When I was on the tornado on that Friday morning, I picked up shingles, and volunteers picked up insulation and all of these kinds of things. And people were really appreciative of the cleanup we did. We had food trucks there, but the most powerful thing was that we sat with people and we wept with them. That I ended up having a good cry later that day because of all the people I'd hugged, all the people who I'd seen tears in their eyes, all the people who, while I was cleaning up their yard, I sat down with them and I said, I just want you to know, I'm really sorry this happened. I'm really sorry this happened to you. See, the hardest part of brokenness is leaning into it. We don't like to do it. We don't want to get messy. We don't want to look at the messy part of our lives. We want them rebuilt, but we don't want to actually look in the face of the brokenness. But to look at the vulnerability and the shame in your life and the brokenness that you have in that relationship with your son or your daughter and saying, this is broken and I'm weeping over it. That it makes me so sad that our marriage relationship isn't in a good place. It's so hard to sit down and have that conversation instead of just living as roommates. It's easier to live as roommates rather than as a married couple, isn't it? Rather than to sit down and actually have the hard conversation. To sit down together and say, I'm weeping over the brokenness of this. To look at your financial situation and to lean into it and to weep over the mistakes that maybe you've made or to weep over what's happened to you. It's the hardest part of brokenness, is looking it in the face. Going on a trip and seeing people living in poverty that you see on TV and looking at it in the face. I can tell you firsthand what's that like. I've been in a children's home where a teenage girl handed me a baby she was taking care of. And she said, I don't understand why you wouldn't just take this baby home. And to sit there and to look the brokenness in the face in your life is hard. To sit and weep. But the powerful part of brokenness is leaning into it. The powerful part of brokenness is to lean into it. The power comes from sitting and looking at it and realizing what it is, to sit next to the person who's broken and to sit with them and say, I weep with you. It's not just the hardest part, but it's the powerful part. Why? Because it's step number one towards rebuilding. See, Nehemiah would say, what's step number one? What's rebuild step one? You want to rebuild in your life? Let what's broken break your heart. Because that's going to motivate you. That's what motivates us as this church, is we see the brokenness in our community around us and the need for hope and how many people know Jesus. You let what's broken break your heart and you continue to move forward with the mission. It's mission critical. It's the same in your life. When you look in your own life and you see what's broken, you say, man, I weep for this. This porn addiction I have, this alcohol addiction I have, this broken relationship I have. I don't want this anymore. It's broken. You don't move for the tools. You don't move to action. We'll get there next week. But you weep and you sit. So then what did Nehemiah do? He says this. He says, in fact, 4 days, I mourned, I fasted, and I prayed to the God of heaven. He prayed to the God of heaven. Rebuild step 2 was bring what's broken to God's heart. Now that I've seen what's broken and I've wept over it, now I'm going to also at the same time bring that to God's heart. And Nehemiah comes to God in prayer. And you see this theme over and over and over again in the book of Nehemiah, where he prays and then he acts, and he prays and then he acts. And he actually prays 12 times in the book of Nehemiah. Now, what does it look like to pray about brokenness? What does it look like to pray about brokenness? Well, Nehemiah shows us. And this is what he says. This passage of scripture is so special. You want to lean in and pay attention to this. This is what he says. He says, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant, his promise of unfailing love with those who love him and obey his commands, listen to my prayer. Look down and see me praying night and day for your people, Israel. Nehemiah drops to his knees and he doesn't say, oh God, I've got this problem or that problem. He starts, God, you're great and you're awesome. And this brokenness that I'm seeing, you're so much bigger and you're so much greater. And for Nehemiah, he's finding hope in the midst of this. God, you're awesome. And I know you can do something about this. When you bring your brokenness to God, and you say to him, God, I know you're bigger than this. God, I want you, I know you're a God of promises. I want you to see me praying and recognizing that I know you are bigger than this. And then what does Nehemiah do? He starts to own it. He says, I confess that we have sinned against you. He doesn't say, I confess that they sinned against you. I confess that my grandfather sinned against you, or those people over in Jerusalem sinned against you. He's owning his own piece of it. I confess that we have sinned against you. You see, when there's brokenness in your life, there's things that can happen to you that you have no control over. And then there are things that happen to you because you just did something really stupid, or you made poor decisions, or you hurt someone. And then there are situations that are in the middle. And Nehemiah is saying, whatever I own, God, I confess it to you. He says, yes, even my own family and I sinned. We had turned from you, and that's why the Babylonians took us. We have sinned terribly by not obeying the commands and the decrees and regulations that you gave us through your servant Moses. He says, God, I confess to you that I own a part of this, that this brokenness in my life, there are parts of it that are a result of things that I've done. If there are, show them to me. And then Nehemiah claims a promise. And this is what he says. He says, please remember what you told your servant Moses. If you are unfaithful to me, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, even if you are exiled to the ends of the earth, no matter how far away, God, you said, no matter how far away, no matter how far I've gone from you, no matter how broken I am, no matter how messed up I am, you said, God, that if we return to you, no matter how exiled we are to the ends of the earth, you promised, you said, I will bring you back to the place I have chosen for my name to be honored. God, you are great and awesome. You are bigger than my brokenness. And I confess the places that I've made some mistakes. But I'm claiming the promise that you said that if I turn to you in my brokenness, you will meet me there and you will bring me back to you. The people you rescued, God, by your great power and strong hand are your servants. Oh Lord, please hear my prayer. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. God, I'm returning to you. I'm bringing my brokenness to you. You promise no matter how broken it is, how messed up it is, how far away I feel from you, that you will meet me in the midst of this broken relationship, broken financial situation, in the midst of me reaching out to people who are broken because they've been trafficked or broken because they've been abused, that wherever it is, God, your promise is, I am present in broken places. I am present in the broken places. You promise it. Nehemiah says, meet me here in the brokenness. Meet me here in the brokenness. I did years of student ministry. There's a young girl, her name is Sophie, and she was in grade 8 and then grade 9. And we would pray at the end of our student ministry nights on youth group on Sunday nights, and she would cry every week as she prayed for child soldiers in Uganda. And she would come to God and she'd say, I don't know what to do and I don't know how to make a difference. And she'd be crying at the end of every single prayer session. She was broken over what was happening to these children. And she came in prayer, and that probably went on for a year. And eventually someone came alongside her and a plan went in place, but it all started with her heart being broken, and it changed the trajectory of her life. As she went to help these Ugandan child soldiers and raise money and work with a leadership organization to help do all of that, but it all began with a broken heart. You know, the CEO and the founder of World Vision that helps children all over the world, that all really began with a prayer of his where he said, let my heart be broken for the things that break God's heart. Can I ask you a question? What are the things in the world maybe that break your heart? That you're saying to God, I'm sitting and I'm weeping and I'm praying and I'm confessing my role and I'm asking you to be present with me in the midst of this. Or where are the areas in your life? Now, this is a harder question, but a more important one, I think. Where are the areas in your life that are broken and they break God's heart, but maybe they don't break yours? Maybe your porn addiction breaks God's heart, but it doesn't quite break yours yet. Or maybe you're drinking more than you should, but it's not breaking your heart the way it breaks God's heart. And you're just kind of feeling numb. You say, God, what in my life is breaking your heart? And may my heart be broken by that too, so that we can begin to rebuild and claim the promise that God says, I'm present with you in the broken places. To get on your knees and to say, God, I sit, I weep, and now I come to you and I confess to you that I have a role to play in some of this, and I claim your promise that you are present with me. And you might be saying, yeah, Jeff, what about the doing though? What about getting my tools out? What about making a difference? What about stepping out and having a plan and making all that work and really jumping on top of the problem? We're going to get to all that. But what Nehemiah shows us is that it all begins with facing our brokenness and inviting God into the midst of it. So here's my challenge for you today. Is I'm going to give you a prayer, and you're going to need your phone for this. I'm going to give you a prayer. And I want you to fill in the blanks here. And this is really going to help you launch well into this series. And this is the prayer. God, my heart is broken for blank. God, my heart is broken for my marriage. God, my heart is broken for this broken relationship with my friend. My heart is broken for my sister. My heart is broken for child slavery. My heart is broken for the abuse. My heart is broken by my anxiety, by my sense of overwhelm. My heart is broken for my kids and where they're at. God, my heart is broken for, put the name in if you want. And I confess that I blank. I confess that I had a role in this. I confess that I've just pushed this to the side and not addressed it. I confess that I should have done something about this and I didn't earlier. I confess that I should have called, that I should have said something, that I should have had a conversation. And God, meet me here in the midst of my brokenness. Now, when it comes to this prayer, maybe for you, you're someone who's brand new to what the Christian faith is all about. And this is why we continue to say here at Connexus, you want to have a relationship with God that comes through Jesus. You want to have a relationship with God that comes through Jesus. And why is that? And Scripture says that Peter says that by his wounds, by God, Jesus' death on the cross, our brokenness is healed. That God sent his son to die on the cross so we can confess and have forgiveness of sin and have God meet us in the midst of our brokenness. That's what a relationship with Jesus, that's what it's all about. And so here's what I want to challenge everybody to do today, to be bold and to step out in this way, is not just to fill in these blanks, but we've actually got a group of people praying today and praying tomorrow night for you. And what I want you to do is take your phone and text your prayer to this number. And this group of people, our church wants to be with you. We want to pray for you. We want to be present with you in prayer in the midst of this. Totally confidential. Nobody's going to email you, going to text you back. If you just want to put initials in for someone's name, whatever you're comfortable with, but send that prayer in today. Start this series well. Move towards rebuilding you by taking step number 1. By having your heart broken for what breaks God's heart. And then step number 2, bringing it to God and saying, meet me here. What's going to happen is we're going to put this number on the screen and the band's going to share a song this morning. And as you're sitting there, what I want you to do is over the course of this song, text your prayer in or text in your version of this prayer. We want to be praying with you. And as you face your brokenness, next week, Nehemiah will help us begin to rebuild.